Lindsay Epperly, a founder and CEO who's ready to rewrite the definition of imposter syndrome. I created Who Made You the Boss to let you know that you're not alone. If you've been wondering whether your burnout is actually a sign toward evolution, or if perhaps there's something more to these challenges we face as leaders, creatives, and entrepreneurs, you're in the right place if you're looking to embrace the challenges you once perceived as negative, if you're ready to own your entire story, and if you're working to level up your business in ways you never thought possible. You'll learn all of this and more by listening in and doing the hard work you know you were meant to do. So let's get started together today on Who Made You the Boss. All right, lovely listeners, welcome back to another episode of Who Made You the Boss, where I am joined today by my dear friend, Garrett Gravesen. And Garrett and I were just talking about how usually I record the intro to these conversations separately. But then Garrett did what he always does. He did things a little bit differently, and he sent me over a bio that is so over the top. I was like, Garrett, I feel silly reading this because it's so special that it needs your energy brought to it. So I'm reading this bio live. And if you guys are hearing this, that means my wonderful producer, Betsy, approved it. If you're not hearing it, well, then I guess you're not hearing it. But I want to welcome Garrett Gravesen, the professor of possibility, who stitches a passport quilt of tales so outlandish they make Marco Polo's adventures look like a weekend getaway. Garrett, is that true?
It's going to be true as long as we keep going. Let's keep going.
Okay, let's keep going. I mean, his travels are not just about the thrill. They are lessons in living. He has learned to ski in North Korea, and he once visited 52 countries in 52 weeks with only a tuxedo and a toothbrush. And if you're watching the YouTube video of this, you know, same tuxedo, you've definitely washed it, right?
100% watched it, but I've had to go through 7 over the course of every country in the world.
Amazing. We're going to get all into the travel side of things, but then more about Garrett, his heart, what he's done, what has he not done? He started a nonprofit organization. He has spoken alongside Mandela's cellmate in South Africa. He has scaled 3 companies from scratch to more than 7 figures each. And then his magnum opus is 10 Seconds of Insane Courage, which is not just a book, but a call to action. We're going to get into that today. And he really believes that every tick of the clock is an opportunity for courage and the serendipity that awaits when you turn every what if into a why not. So we're definitely diving into that. And just a little bit more on him. I know Garrett personally. We've been friends for about a decade now. I have seen him go through the most amazing highs and lows. This man has survived great loss. He has achieved incredible goals. He stepped foot in all 197 countries, which has been very fun to live vicariously on. And you even won the same award as Elvis. Things you haven't done, though, Garrett. You have not ever eaten a vegetable. You have not had a sip of water. You have never ran a mile, and you have never been a guest on Who Made You the Boss until today. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I cannot top that intro. Luckily, I helped write it. So I'm going to say yes, approved. Please put it into the intro for this podcast.
Lovely. Well, I'm thinking it's going to make it in there because I don't know that I can reread that without seeing you smile and enthusiastically cheer on, yes, this is your story, and I cannot wait to dive into it with you. Really, we usually kick off these interviews with the question that the show title possesses, right? Who made you the boss? What was that exact moment for you? And I'm going to plug a story that you told me along the way, and I'm curious if this was the defining moment or just one of many steps. Remember you talking about you were sitting on like the steps of somewhere with like a girl that you were dating at the time and a couple of friends. And like one friend was like a virtuoso violinist or something. I'm probably getting all these facts wrong, but they were all going on to do these amazing things. And then they like turned to you and said, Garrett, what about you? What are you doing with your life? And you're like, oh God, like, do you remember this story?
Yeah, of course. I call it From Heartbreak to Harvard. So I love catchy, snappy titles, but it was a girlfriend. It was many moons ago, but she did get into Harvard and I did not. And so let's start there. So for anyone that was a insecure overachiever early in life, I'll be the first one to raise my hand. I wanted to go to Harvard out of high school, certainly didn't, but my girlfriend did. And I remember going to visit her. I was at the University of Georgia, go Dogs. And I was even the student body president, which I thought was amazing, of 30,000 people. But then I went to go visit her up at Harvard. And I remember sitting around, and one person, like you said, had first of all, they all got into Harvard. So let's just start there. So
It's a table
that's
stakes.
just immediately like, okay, ego check. And then, like one was a Rhodes Scholar, one was the number one flute player in the nation, one had kind of written the next version of like, imagine Hamilton. And then as kind of everyone's going around, they looked at me and they said, so what have you ever done?
Oh.
And I'd never felt so small in my entire life. But it made me realize, I may not be the smartest or even good at a musical instrument. I may never write a Broadway play, but I could be the best version of me, the most unique, authentic version of myself. And I didn't have it figured out at the time, and I didn't know it for many, many years. But eventually I had the courage to say, hey, I'm not like everybody else. And that's what makes me unique. And I'm going to lean fully into that and become the biggest, boldest version of who I am. And I think that's something each and every one of us can do if we have the courage to pursue it.
That's beautiful. Do you feel like that was your defining who made you the boss moment, or was there another one that actually like kind of kicked you and made you say, I'm taking the reins?
Yeah. So let's fly 8,000 miles around the world on the other side of the world. And let's just step straight into Hong Kong. So I think that was my defining moment. I said after college, I wanted to make money. I wanted to be an investment banker. And I got an internship my final year at UGA doing investment banking in Hong Kong for Merrill Lynch. And then I quickly realized what we all think on paper is great, oftentimes is not. Mm. And so I worked 18 hours a day, 6.5 days a week. And my moment that kicked me in the teeth was I watched my boss miss he and his wife's anniversary and 4-year-old daughter's birthday in the same week. Mm. And I said, I wasn't married, didn't have kids at the time, but I said, I never want to be that husband. I certainly don't want to be that father. And I don't think this career is for me. But I had no plan B. I had no other option. I had no idea what I was going to do. And so I kind of had to lean back on courage and said, well, what would I do if everything was to start over and I had one more chance? And I said, well, Mom and Dad, I'm not going to graduate on time. They were really upset by that. I'm not coming back to the University of Georgia. They were really upset with that. I said, but I promise I'll graduate. But I want to take my last summer and I want to go do something completely different that's true and authentic to who I am. And I love volunteering and I love giving back and I loved exploring. And after seeing Asia, I really wanted to go to Africa. And I said, not to make money, but to do something impactful. And I ended up there at an AIDS orphanage in the middle of Nairobi, Kenya. And I knew nothing about volunteering, giving back this children or this cause or how to help or how to connect, but I knew I wanted to do something. And I met one little boy and he couldn't pronounce my name, Garrett, couldn't say Gravesen. So he called me GG, my initials. Yeah. Now everyone calls me GG. My Instagram is GG Worldwide, but it started from a 10-year-old little boy with a big baggy orange shirt and a belt loop that he had to put on the last one to keep his little pants up. And his name was Martin. And he said one thing, Lindsay, he said one thing that I'll always remember. The first day I came, as I was leaving, he said, everyone says they'll be back. Will you really come back and see us? Mm. And that was the moment where I said, maybe I can use my time and my talents to impact and inspire other people. And it's got to start right now with this one promise to this one little boy named Martin. And days turned into weeks turned into months. And instead of coming back after the summer to finish graduating from UGA, I took an entire year in Africa at this orphanage, and it was the best decision I ever made.
It's so, I mean, that is so inspiring. And I have so many individual questions from that, about how that might have inspired travels, how that might have inspired your next goals. And what I want to focus on, you've talked a lot about authenticity, and I know that's really important to you. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that I admire most about you from the outside looking in is that you very rarely define yourself based off of one specific thing that you've been building, right? Like you've started and scaled 3 companies, of which I only even knew about one, and I've known you for a decade. So I think you just draw people in because you are very unabashedly you. And so I'm just curious, how do you think that is that you've managed to separate Garrett and all of these wonderful ideas and all the things you want to do for the world and whatever it is you're building at the time?
Yeah, I just meet people where they're at, right? Like I always say, one of the best leadership lessons I always heard was trade I for you. Trade I for you. And when you think about leadership, right? And I love leadership, and we can talk about another company where we help build Chick-fil-A Leader Academy. I think Chick-fil-A is just a amazing company that truly embodies servant leadership, but I like to keep things short and sticky. So I say, trade I for you. What does that mean? When you look at leaders and they tend to say, I want to do this, or I want this, or I want to get this, or we're not really inspired or rallied around those people. When they trade I for you, where it's, how can I help you do this? How can I help you get this? How can I help you become this? Those are the people we want to work for. We want to work with. We want to rally around. And I've always tried to have that mantra. How do I continue to trade I for you? How can I help you do this? You become this, you get that. And I've just found that when you kind of go, hands open, eyes wide, like, what can I do to help and serve other people? It certainly comes around, not all the time, but I've always just tried to treat life like that. Like, I would love to help other people with their big goals, with their big dreams. And a lot of people have come alongside me. I've been so blessed and fortunate. I think I saw it very early in life when giving a speech about others. Vince Dooley kind of stepped in and wanted to help others. And I just admire people that do that. So I've tried to model it along the way and just meet people where they're at and help where I can.
That's incredible. That may be the answer to the next question that I had for you, because I'm just asking out of pure admiration in the way that you have managed to scale the businesses that you've created. You've got to allot your time wisely. And I imagine you're not able to spend all 24/7 in each of these businesses when you're building them, because you have so many other tremendous goals that you're working on. And so I was even curious how you would set these companies up for success in a way that has allowed them to move forward with or without you present.
Yeah, and this is going to be a little contrarian, but I think this is where businesses get it wrong. I think courageous leadership is having the courage to embrace personal goals. So a lot of times we want to only focus on professional goals. Great leaders, there is no problem at all knowing what your people really want, knowing what uniquely inspires and drives them. Lindsay, if I know that you want to become the next Gordon Ramsay of cooking or Marie Kondo of cleaning, like, I want to know that about my people. I want to encourage them to do that. I want to encourage them to do that outside the office, during their vacations, on the weekends. It doesn't have to be, you do that and that's outside of the office. It's like, no, I want to get to know you as a human. Like, I want to know your uniqueness. And I've always shared my uniqueness with others, that my dream is to one day visit every country in the world. And so I'm going to go after it with verve and vigor as much as I can. But what is it that drives you? And I think when you can be authentic and really get to know people as people, right? Like, at the end of the day, sales comes down to people. Marketing comes down to people, leadership, organizational structure. It's a people-driven idea every way through the value chain. And so if we can really get to know our people, which I think is one of my, gifts of just, hey, I'm going to create a safe space and an open environment. Tell me what you want to do. I want to embrace your personal goals right alongside with you. And I want to encourage you to do those things. And I think when you have a boss or a friend or someone leading or running a company that truly cares about who you are as an individual and really wants you to succeed inside and outside the workplace, people tend to really want to help out, work harder, and serve more. And so I've always tried to lead with that in mind.
That's incredible. Well, and you model that as well, because that's why this allure has always been something that I've appreciated about you, that you are able to both build your professional goals and go after your personal goals. There's never, I'm going to wait till I retire and I'm going to do it. And I'm curious, how much of that was inspired by your relationship with your dad and losing him in your early 20s, right? Was it?
Yeah, most of it, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I love my father. My father was my hero. I talk about him all the time, but we have this false idea that, we have forever. There's no deadlines on personal dreams, right? If we're in a company, we got to hit first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter goals. That doesn't exist with personal dreams. Like, personal dreams have no deadlines. And so for my dad, I always want to do a father-son trip with him. And so we do what typical people do. All right, next birthday, next decade, next. So when he turned 50, father-son trip didn't happen. A decade goes by. At 60, it doesn't happen. And so finally, when he reached 62, after working 40 years in his life, no more excuses. I was so excited. He retired. And after 40 years of working, 30 days later, he found out he had stage 4 cancer and a year left to live. And oftentimes life's not fair. And I was running a company, and Chick-fil-A was our client, and they are growing and exploding, and we were too. But I said, you get one mom and one dad in life.
Mm-hmm.
And Chick-fil-A, being Chick-fil-A, said, you take as much time as you need and be there for your father. And so I moved in with him, and I was his caretaker. And every day I journaled and I asked these deep questions about why we have these fears and how do we overcome them more and how do we say yes more often. And it was those conversations with my dad that I was never going to write a book. But I thought maybe these lessons could help at least one person or a few people, or maybe I could share it with just the folks at Chick-fil-A that we work with and train. But it turned out to be everyone faces these things. We all have, the fear of the unknown, the fear of the first step, the fear of failure, fear that we're not good enough. And I said, I'm not good at long-term things. I like short-term action. So I called it the catchy title, 10 Seconds of Insane Courage, which is just how do we get going in the moment and how do we face these fears more often? But it all started with a conversation with my dad, him waiting to the end and not being able to do these things. And I want to encourage more people to act now, say yes more often, and use those 10 seconds of insane courage to truly live the life that they want to live.
Yeah. Was this the point where the goal of reaching all 197 countries was first born?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so Dad, if you know much about cancer and we've probably all had a family member or a friend or someone that's gone through it, is you go through chemo and you go through radiation and it beats down your body. Well, if you back up, 2 decades before, I had talked all about quality of life care for these children with HIV and AIDS. Yeah. They may not have long lives, but they have important ones. And how do we make the most of their lives right now? And so I'd built that, nonprofit organization on the belief that quality of life care matters. And I carried that right into that time with my father. And I said, you know what? Screw it. Let's do it. Famous Richard Branson quote, let's come off the chemo. Let's get rid of the radiation. And let's do that father-son trip we always talked about. And so we did. And the closest, coolest place we could find was Havana, Cuba. We went down there for 3 days. I bought him a big straw hat and the fattest Cuban cigar you can possibly imagine, which is not what you're supposed to do when you have cancer, but it was a father, a son, and a memory we would always have in a 1958 cherry red classic convertible in the streets of Havana. And it was a memory I would always cherish and still do to this day. And I had a chance to ask my dad, what advice, can you give me, leave me with, what do you truly believe I need to know? And he simply said, I want you to take one thing you'd be insanely proud of and go do it now. Find one thing you'd be insanely proud of and go do it now. And for me, I was like, what better way to honor and respect my dad than to take all of his lessons, put it together, and go share that message now. And so that's what became the book. And I said, all right, if the book's called 10 Seconds of Insane Courage, could I take it around the world? And then if I took it around the world, could I go tell this message to everyone that would listen in every country around the world? And that's exactly what's happened over the past decade.
That's incredible. It's been so fun to follow along with that journey. I mean, you have had just incredible experiences. I still have my postcard that you sent me from the underwater post office. And,
yes.
Wait, where was that? Why am
Vanuatu.
Vanuatu. So tell me, I mean, when you're traveling like this, let's talk about these travel experiences a little bit, what you've learned, how that shaped you, how you're launching all of these endeavors beside it. There had to be some mental and emotional challenges, right? I mean, can you tell us about some of the hurdles you faced while you were trying to reach that goal of 197?
Yeah, so we can start with the Taliban in Afghanistan, North Korea. I actually got stuck on an island called Kiribati. It's Kiribati if you try to spell it. But the most famous book in that island is called The Sex Lives of Cannibals. And you're like, oh no, I'm stuck. COVID's on the way. It was right before March 2020. I've got to get out of here. This is bad news. So that's a fun one. In North Korea, it was wild. If you go there, there's only one hotel that tourists stay in because there's no tourists that go. Yeah. And if you Google it, there's actually a missing 5th floor. And so in this hotel, so we actually went with a group of business school colleagues, and we were told that no, there actually is a 5th floor. It may be missing on the elevator. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But the 5th floor is a surveillance floor. So everything you say or do is monitored and recorded in your room.
Oh, God.
And so it's kind of like this Truman Show where everything is, kind of created, especially for you for that experience, and nothing's real. But then I have to take a step back because I love leadership, and I go, someone's always watching you anyways. Like, how are you going to act? How are you going to respond? How are you going to treat people? What are you going to do when no one's watching? It's like, that's the true test of like character, right? Integrity. Yeah. And I was like, just because officially I know, it was kind of a reminder of, but this happens anyways, right? Like, I really want to always be an authentic version of myself. And in Afghanistan, like we had to get airlifted across the country because of the Taliban. Like, we went in Kabul right before the presidential election. The Taliban, both sides knew that the Taliban was going to come over, take over Kabul, take over the country. And I'm like, oh, this is the worst timing. But if we didn't go then, we wouldn't get in, and I wouldn't reach 197. So we decided to leave Kabul, go to the northwestern part of Afghanistan called Bamyan, because there were street bombings every day in Kabul, on this little airline called Cam Air, which, if KAM, you Google it, is like the worst ranked airline in the world. It's like more plane crashes, horrible safety records, but I'm like, it's better than staying in Kabul. And so we went, and as soon as we landed in Bamyan, they shut down the airline, no more flights out. Again, courageous leadership. I was with 10 people all trying to reach this 197 goal. I was the only American. I was given a number. I put in my phone as Afghanistan 911, true story. But it was for an air evacuation team that I gotten from a member of kind of a, special ops unit in America. Yeah, I got to be careful with my words.
Yeah, yep.
But I knew I was free. I knew I could get out. I knew they would come as an American and take me. But that's not leadership. You can't leave 9 other people behind. And that's what I said. I said, now that I'm here as an American, and I need help, but I can't leave the other 9 people behind. And they agreed. Yeah, they sent 2 planes for 10 people and got all of us out.
The contact you had actually still agreed
to do it for all 10 of us. And then how great is this? We got back from Bamyan to Kabul, got out of the country to Pakistan, all 10 of those people. They were happy. I was happy. I was happy to be able to, get us there and whatever courageous leadership that meant. But all those people, all 10 of them, a year later, when I celebrated 197 and stepped into my very last country with all of my friends and family and my mom who came, all 10 of those flew in to San Marino and then later Italy to come celebrate as a thank you for what happened in Afghanistan. So you just never know how these stories and these people that you interact with will come back later in life. But some interesting stories along the way for sure.
You absolutely have. Well, and one question I had even kind of written down from remembering following along on your travels during this time, and maybe Afghanistan tops it, but I just vividly remember my question was going to be, at what point along the way did you experience burnout when it came to trying to reach this goal? And then my follow-up question was going to be, and why was it in Yemen when you were almost kidnapped? So I am curious because the Afghanistan story sounds like it might top the Yemen story. But I just remember, Garrett and I met through these mastermind groups that we do in Atlanta. And we have a great group of friends that meet together and talk about our businesses. And I just remember when you shared that you were about to go on this next adventure, it was like, well, I sure hope he comes back. I mean, we like Garrett. We hope he doesn't get kidnapped in Yemen, which is very likely for a blonde-haired, blue-eyed American tourist. So I'm just curious. Tell us more about, were there any points where you thought, oh, gosh, I just should not keep going on this. I'm burning out for more than just my own sake of trying to reach the goal, but I'm burning out because this is more than just courage. This is a safety question.
Sure. Yeah. So Yemen is probably the closest. That I'll tell you a fun story about the Trevi Fountain in Italy. So the Yemen.
Keep it light.
Yeah. So Yemen is the one country. It's a lawless nation. We have no embassy. So once you're in, you're on your own. You've got to get yourself out. Well, 197 is 197. You've got to go to all of them. And I'm not one to step across the border because I don't think that counts. So we decided to spend 5 full days in Yemen. Okay. And so we went to Sana'a, which is kind of like 5.5-hour drive, into the main part of Yemen. And I went with 2 other friends. Both were trying to reach 197. One was the youngest Spaniard to ever do it. And my other friend was the former Falcons mascot. And so amazing. He's hilarious. My other friend's a professional travel.
Wait, was this Trey? Did
Trey Humphreys, hilarious. Exactly. Okay. But they both have dark hair, kind of darker complexion, brown eyes. And I'm blonde hair, blue eyes, right? So you can dress in local garb, you can try to cover yourself, but at a checkpoint, you still have blue eyes.
Yeah.
Which is an immediate red flag. And so I was really nervous, like very nervous. Even with sunglasses on, we tried that through a few checkpoints. We're like, this just gets really, really dangerous. But when I really wanted to quit was if you look at the continent of Africa, there's 54 countries. Split it in half, 27, 27. 27 on Eastern Africa, pretty safe. You can get through. It's Western Africa, Middle Africa, Boko Haram, like a lot of scary, crazy things going on there. And I was like, I just can't just power through these places. Like, it's just so hard, so intense. It's just so overwhelming that you want to quit. It breaks you. And I was like, I've got to figure out a way to keep up the courage and to kind of refuel myself. And it was funny, if you look at any airline routes, the one city that flies in and out of most of Central and West Africa is Rome, Italy. And the flights are actually insanely cheap. Like, I'm talking like $100 flights. And I'm like, well, for the cost of an extra hotel night in one of these, crazy countries in Western Africa, which charge you through the roof because there's no hotels, you can take a quick flight back to Rome. And I'm like, you're telling me spaghetti, pasta, and I can throw another penny in the Trevi fountain, wishing myself good luck for the next few journeys. I have probably, Lindsay, been back and forth, Rome, to the Ivory Coast, Rome to Togo, Rome to Benin, Rome to Sierra Leone, and I'm like, for $100, it's worth it. Like, I've probably thrown more pennies in the Trevi fountain, wishing a little bit more good luck on this route than any other place across 27 countries in West Africa, because it was actually affordable. And I just really believe that luck needs to be on your side. So for all those people that go to Italy, please throw a penny over your left shoulder into the Trevi fountain, because it at least got me through a lot of the crazy countries. At least made me believe that I could keep going and do it.
I love it so much. I know it's funny because our group of friends has asked me before, do you ever help Garrett with his trips? He travels so much. And I'm like, have you seen the way that Garrett travels? This is not exactly how jet set world travel is planning trips these days. So I appreciate all of the tips. Now, anytime I'm going to the Ivory Coast, I'll know route through Rome.
Exactly.
So we talk a lot on this podcast about imposter syndrome. Yeah. And I am curious, as you're setting out these giant, some might even say outlandish goals of what you want to achieve. Do you ever have those moments where you go like, well, who am I to do it? Why me? What is it? What is that? Does that ever manifest for you? Or is this just, and is that where courage comes in?
So I've co-founded 3 companies. Mm-hmm. I always think you need someone in your corner with you. I've never done it myself. I've always had a co-founder. So ideally, a co-founder kind of balances your strengths and weaknesses, but believes in the same things that you do. But my imposter syndrome now, as I'm speaking to corporate audiences, I'm like, who am I to speak about these things? Because I've never sat in a corporate job.
Right. Easy for you to say, because you haven't had to sit in a situation where you have a clock in, clock out, 9 to 5 type of job. That makes so much sense.
100%. And so the joke that I make is I basically did reverse retirement, and everyone laughs. And I said, by reverse retirement, I wrote a book, started a charity, and went to every country in the world, which is what most people want to do when they retire. They want to write a book, they want to give back, and they want to travel. I'm like, but let me give you the lessons that I can pull forward that I've already seen of how to do it, why it matters, and why you need a bigger why when you do, come to the end of your, official career, or you're thinking about what truly matters with friends, family, when you're trying to decide what you really want with your life. Because a lot of things that we think we want, there's some good and some bad with it. But at the end of the day, it starts with a bigger why. And that's, I think we all have this imposter syndrome, this fear of failure. But for me, it's the fear of regret that I think really anchors me.
Is that your why?
People to have that. Yeah. And so, there was the famous, not even a study, but it was put out, the 5 regrets of the dying. And so if you've ever been to Bali, I always love, the gates of heaven, that amazing photo that you see all over social media. And every time it makes me stop and think about the 5 regrets of the dying. And the number 1 regret of the dying is, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not what others expected of me. Another regret of the dying, I wish I had the courage to tell others what I really felt.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we can then pull that back into our present moment, and I can share that with people, I saw it firsthand with my father. I don't want it to happen to anyone in this crowd or listening to this podcast. I want us to really take advantage of the time we have now to say yes more often to the things that really light us up, and have the courage to be who we truly are inside and outside of the office. If you're running a company, lean into people's personal dreams and their professional goals. Because I think we live in a world where everything is so combined. Our work-life balance doesn't exist. We take home our computers, we sleep with our iPhones next to our beds, and it doesn't have to be that way. We can be the leaders that leaders were always looking for. And your podcast title's Who Made You the Boss? I hope if I'm the boss, I'm the type of leader that trades eye for you, wants to embrace your personal goals, and wants you to go live a beautiful life.
Yes. And the beauty of that too, and the tongue in cheek of this whole thing is anyone is a leader. Everyone is a leader. Every single individual, whether they run a company or they run their household or they simply run their own lives and day and self, you have the opportunity to do that and to make that choice of replace I for you. Because even when you point back to the very foundation of heroes, you were just yourself at that point going out on stage, right? You weren't doing it in charge of an organization. It eventually led to that kind of accidentally, but you were able to embrace that as a single individual.
Absolutely.
I feel like the through line for you when it comes to courage is always about the people. The courageous thing is actually to take that extra moment, whether it's seeing your employees for who they are, meeting them where they are, finding out their goals of becoming that next Gordon Ramsay and supporting those, or just seeing the people around you. I mean, as you travel to the most unbelievable of places, your stories are always around the people.
Absolutely. And I think that's, to me, what great leaders do. You know, I give a talk about courageous leadership. Courageous leadership starts and ends with getting to know your people and putting yourself right there alongside them, and truly embracing their personal goals along with, you know, the professional goals of the business. And how do we blend those two so that they're happy, they're excited, and they want to come work with someone that believes in who they are.
Beautiful. I think that is a great note to end on. I've learned so much that I didn't know about you from knowing you for so long. And I know that people listening will want to hear even more. You've got a book chock full of these stories. So obviously they need to pick up 10 Seconds of Insane Courage, and we'll link to that in the show notes. But I'm curious if there's anything else you're working on that everyone should be keeping an eye out for, or ways to follow along. Like how should people stay in all thing Garrett world?
Yeah, so I post a lot of free content all about, you know, the insights from traveling to all 197 countries on LinkedIn. So it's just Garrett Gravesen on LinkedIn. If you want fun tuxedo stories from all around the world and fun, exciting photos, I'm GG Worldwide on Instagram. But I just really believe courage is what we all need. Courage is something we can all do. And I believe courage happens in those small moments. If you can just take the first step and have those 10 seconds of insane courage, that's my message to the world, and I hope everyone takes advantage of it.
I love it. Thank you so much, Garrett, for inspiring us with courage and inspiring us that if ever we wind up in a place like Antarctica with nothing but a tuxedo, we too can survive because you have done it before us. So thank you for leading the way.
Much.
If you've gained some valuable insights from listening to Who Made You the Boss, there are 2 ways we ask our listeners to show us some love. First, share this episode with a friend who you know would benefit. The more we impact others, the more we can grow our resources to impact you. It's a win-win, and it helps us a ton. Second, if you'll take a moment to leave Who Made You the Boss a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast platform, that helps us continue to create meaningful work, and it just makes our day. Thank you, listeners, for being part of this journey. Until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and keep being the boss of your own incredible story.